Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers.
And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 15, Episode 155. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us this Wednesday, Steelers Nation. A little calmer episode today. Everyone who was a Steeler Tuesday is a Steeler today. Dave and I are still here, but still more reaction and fallout to that mega deal that took place on Monday that sent Minkah Fitzpatrick to Miami, that brought in Jalen, Ramsey, and Jonnu. Some small updates there on jersey numbers, maybe some more contractual information, and a whole lot more. Dave, how you doing?
Hey, happy Wednesday to you. And yeah, Tuesday and Wednesday mornings and days are looking like nothing like it was on Monday there. So we still have a little bit to talk about, as you said, about the fallout and all from the trade that went down on Monday. I don't know if we know that much more about contractual stuff. I don't think that's hit yet. In fact, I don't think the official trade will go through on the NFL transaction wire until later today. I think I know, according to Instagram, I think Jonnu Smith at least arrived in Pittsburgh. I would imagine Ramsey's already there as well too, based on some IG stuff from him yesterday as well too. We've got a jam-packed show today. We'll talk about some 90 and 30 series players. As promised, we have Jonas Shaffer from the Baltimore Banner on in the back portion of the show. Spent about 38 minutes with him talking about the what the Baltimore Ravens have done this offseason and how they're a Super Bowl caliber team this year, and even get us a few of thoughts of his on the 2025 Steelers as well too. So a lot to get to today. Where shall we start?
Let's just start with a broad question, Dave. 48 hours to digest this trade. Do you have any different thoughts than you did in our Monday discussion? Do you still like the trade as you did overall? When I asked you the happy, sad question to round out Monday's show, any additional thoughts or feelings?
I think generally I still feel the same overall. I think one of the biggest questions I have moving forward, as most people, is what's going to happen at the free safety position. And I know there's a lot of talk about, could a guy like Ramsey, maybe move to safety or Slay or something along those lines. And I kind of have a hard time imagining that outside of just some spot usage there and some rotations just to maybe confuse some defenses. I think as things sit right now, we'll have to see how many more moves come down the pipe here, before week one. It feels like Juan Thornhill kind of, at least as we sit here right now, might be the guy to pencil in maybe as the free safety right now. A lot of talk about how they'll use, assuming they stay at corner and all like that, Ramsey and Slay. And I don't think you pay a guy like Ramsey. We'll see what the cash ends up being for the Steelers on that side, around $19-20 million or so in 2025 cash. You don't pay a guy like that just to kind of sit some snaps on the sideline. So I think in my head, I kind of envisioned Joey Porter on one side, Ramsey on the other. You get into some sub packet situations. Slay comes in with Ramsey maybe moving inside, and then kind of working from there. But you will have plenty of time to kind of work through that, I think, as training camp gets underway. And obviously we'll be watching to see if this team goes out and adds another safety at this point. Obviously going to miss a guy in general, and you've made some good points about Minkah Fitzpatrick and all. And I think one of the other kind of enlightening things that I think maybe I knew, but I didn't know until I those kind of things when you go into stats and you think you know one thing and you go, oh, okay, well maybe I didn't know that. Jalen Ramsey for his career, Alex, has never had more than 4 interceptions in one season. And if I would have told you that to bet one way or another, true or false on that, I think both of us maybe would have. I think in my head, I thought that he maybe had a season in there that he had maybe 5, 6 or something like that. But the fact of the matter is he's never had more than 4 interceptions in a season. Now, without a doubt, he's been good against the pass overall for his career. Good with passes defense. Had 11 of those last year and all. But we talked about maybe the offset of takeaways when it comes to not necessarily one for one positionally as far as free safety and corner goes, but could a guy like Jalen Ramsey come in here and get this team some of those takeaways that obviously Minkah Fitzpatrick hasn't produced when it comes to that. So I think if there's one thing that's been sort of maybe an aha moment for me since this trade went down is I don't know how cognizant I was of the fact that Jalen Ramsey's never had 4 interceptions in one season. Now, I think he's certainly capable of putting up 5 and 6 in a season, but he's never done it so far in his career. So I guess that would be the one main thing. Look, I think Jonnu Smith is kind of as advertised and I know Jerry Dulac came out and ruffled some feathers on Rich Eisen saying this is just a slight upgrade from what they had last season, in who is it?
Michael Pruitt, he said,
Yeah,
which
Michael
curious comment.
Pruitt, which you're not bringing in a guy giving him a $12 million additional money to be a number 3 guy. This is a guy that I think is going to play a lot on offense in 12, 13 personnel, going to be an integral part of the passing game overall there. Not a great blocker overall there, but Arthur Smith has the history with Jonnu Smith, knows how to use him. I envision going back to the time in Tennessee with him. Do I think Jonnu Smith's going to catch 80 passes this year? No, but I do think he's going to be. I think he brings a plus to this offense, and that's kind of where we left things off, or at least in my head the other day when it comes to Jonnu Smith. So once again, I think my major aha kind of enlightenment, if you will, more so than what we talked about the other day was, I'd like to see Jalen Ramsey come in here and have a career year with interceptions and, at least come close to what he's put up in the past in a single season and past breakups.
I would have guessed the over 2 had you given me that over under on 4, so that is a little surprising. But the good thing is Ramsey's been a playmaker in other ways, in pass rushing, blitzing, a sack last season, 6 tackles for a loss a year ago, and forced fumbles, and his physicality. And so he is more than just a ball hawk, just a pure cover guy. He can impact the game, I think, in every single facet of it: run defense, blitzing, and then, of course, in coverage. And so that's exciting. I still have a skeptical eye towards this trade. I know you and I disagree a little bit on that aspect of it in terms of our overall feelings of the trade, the departure of Minkah Fitzpatrick. But what I do think is the most exciting part of this is Jalen Ramsey as a nickel corner, because I've talked about Pittsburgh's issues at slot corner, post Mike Hilton, never having a good plan there, never having a real strong talent, not having an every down guy that you can trust to really handle everything in the nickel spot, has to do it all, has to play the run and fit against it, has to be able to rush the passer, has to be able to cover slot guys, small guys, shifty guys, big guys, that new age big slot type. You got to be able to do everything, communicate well, and be on the field about 3/4 of the time. And I think Pittsburgh will certainly have that. Their best slot corner, even better than what Mike Hilton was at his peak, probably ever, in terms of a pure slot corner. Somebody compared it in our Monday live stream to Marlon Humphrey. And while stylistically there may be a little different, Ramsey's bigger, but similar roles where Ramsey will play some outside and then kick inside in those sub packages. I think Ramsey will also play some safety this year, which Humphrey generally does not do. So if you ask me to give the most optimistic lens towards this trade, I think what Ramsey can offer as that nickel playmaker is really exciting.
Do you indeed envision kind of the way I do, at least as things sit right now? Base defense, Ramsey, Porter, probably Thornhill at free safety, obviously Deshaun Elliott at strong safety, and then when they do go to a sub package, that Ramsey kicks inside, either as part of nickel or dime, along those lines, with Slay coming in to man the outside.
I think in sub package, I'm with you. You're going to see Ramsey play a lot inside. There's going to be some mixing and matching and leaning on the versatility that we talked about Monday. I think in base, though, it's going to be really interesting. And yes, you can poo-poo base and say it's a relic, it's old, no one uses it. It's still used about 20 to 25% of the time, which is a small number, but it's not nothing. It's going to be 200, 300 snaps this season. Do you take off one of your better corners? Do you do something a little bit different? I mean, heck, let's kind of think outside the box here. Do you have a one safety approach with only Elliott on the field and some combination of Slay and Porter and Ramsey as your other three defensive backs? Because you want to play your best guys. And if you
Right.
tell me your best DBs right now, your top four, it's Slay, it's Porter, it's Ramsey, and it's Elliott. Thornhill and Bishop do not qualify to that point. So I wonder if Pittsburgh will get creative in some of those looks. They use Ramsey at safety in some of those base packages, or maybe Slay gets a look there, or it's one high looks with Ramsey coming down to play that star position. I think you get creative there. I don't think you're going to rubber stamp Juan Thornhill as that free safety necessarily.
All right. And within that, going back to kind of why I'm kind of happy about this isn't this a good thing that we're sitting here with the amount of DB talent, especially at the cornerback position, or at least presumed? I know they're long in tooth. There's a lot of discussion about, the Steelers now have gotten old, and they have, but they've gotten experienced as well too. On top of it, there. I feel excited in the fact that it is going to be interesting to watch, and we'll learn a little bit about this as maybe training camp and the preseason gets underway. But in theory, how much will we really know, and until we get a good 3-4 game sample size with exactly how this team is going to function in base, in sub package? Will we indeed, as you say, will there be some more complexity in having guys move around and maybe only have the one safety on the field and do some rotations and to keep opposing quarterback? I mean, isn't that in and of itself an exciting component to all this, that we are going to kind of try to have to wade ourselves through the first 4 games of the season?
It is, but there's a risk to it too, of the unknown and how these things fit, and interesting in a good way or interesting in a, whoa, this is like a car crash kind of a way, just from the standpoint of it's a bunch of new pieces, they have to fit, and you want to make sure, the sum of their parts is able to match the individual talent. We've seen a lot of teams with a lot of talent that look good on paper. I'll compare it to an NBA team that loads up the Nets from a couple of years ago, right? With who was it? It was Kyrie, it was Durant, it was James Harden. Oh my goodness, there's so much talent. How can
Super
they
team.
super team, the Eagles in the NFL, if you want to stick in the same sport? These things have to be able to work together as a team. And what was the big issue at the end of last year, Dave? Communication, miscommunication, those breakdowns. Now you have a bunch of new pieces coming together that are super talented, but can you fit? Can you communicate? Can you be able to be on the same page for a group basically coming together at the start of training camp? Rodgers added in June, a couple of practices. These new additions, Ramsey coming in June. Smith should have a seamless transition because he's so familiar with the Arthur Smith system. That's not a concern, but it's a lot of new pieces coming together, and there's a risk there that it's going to take a while to fit. And we know Pittsburgh cannot afford to start slowly; they have to get off to a fast start. And this is a 1-year shot with Rodgers, and so it can work absolutely, but there's a risk to it as well.
All right. Does this team need to, and will they go out and get another, free safety option? Because if you look at the depth chart now, you get to that safety position, and we'll cover one of these guys at some point. You've got some guys now that got a little bit of NFL experience that that prior to Minkah being gone, you would have said there's no chance that this guy makes a roster. And then now you're thinking okay, Thornhill's going to figure into this somehow, either the starter or a backup free safety option. But where does it go beyond there, especially when you got Miles Killebrew, who, primarily a special teams guy? Does this team need to go out, and will they go out and get another, Justin Simmons, Whitehead? I mean, there's a couple of names still out there that they could go get on the cheap.
It's a good question, and I thought ESPN's Matt Bowen had a good article yesterday listing the best 17 free agents still available, and 3 of them were safeties. It was Justin Simmons, Blackman from the Colts
Right.
and Marcus Williams from Baltimore. And so of that trio, I know you mentioned Simmons. Would he be the top guy you'd be most interested in, Dave?
Oh, I haven't gone look. I mean, obviously he's up there in age, and I think the reason he's unemployed right now is the fact that he's probably wanting a little bit more money and might be sitting to wait, to see what happens there. Uh I don't know if I have a ranking of them just yet, but I mean, obviously Simmons, I think, what was one of the first names that came to my
hmm
mind.
Yeah, and I thought about Blackman too. He's been productive. He's younger. He's only 26. He's got 7 picks the last 2 years. He's played a lot of free safety. The concern is though just the overall run defense, the tackling. He's kind of more of that pure free safety center fielder for a team like Pittsburgh that seems to be building its offseason around getting more physical,
Right.
stouter against the run. Does he really fit? That would maybe lend itself towards Simmons, but I know Simmons, at least according to PFF, had a pretty high missed tackle rate last year. So I don't really know what's going to happen. I certainly would not be opposed to adding another safety. I think it's pretty thin right now. I had my concerns about Thornhill, and is he going to be the every down kind of a guy? I wonder if they're going to have more of a sub package role for him, so he's not playing 1,000 snaps this season after 2 pretty bumpy years in Cleveland. So, do you go to camp and just kind of see how it looks and then go from there? Some of these guys probably will be sitting out there for a little while longer. That may be this team's approach. It's kind of similar to wide receiver. We look at the group internally, evaluate it, and if you want to make an addition, then you do so a bit later.
How much of it is a minor plus to some degree that Ramsey and Elliott kind of know each other a little bit?
What is there from Miami? I guess the year
Yeah.
in Miami. I don't know. I mean, does it help? Sure, it always helps when there's a familiar face in there to accelerate that learning curve, doing some of this stuff on the fly. But ultimately, is that going to make or break the success or failure of this team? Probably not.
We heard, obviously a lot of Steelers players pretty shocked by Minkah going out the door. We heard Cam Hayward talk about it, and several other players have chimed in. I mean, this obviously came out of the blue to even some of the team leaders on the team, and man, even Aaron Rodgers. You go back to what Aaron Rodgers said in that interview with Pat McAfee, talking about how smart of a guy Minkah
Yeah,
is, and was kind
helping the
of.
quarterbacks, right? Wasn't
Yeah,
he talking about that?
yeah, was really looking forward to all that. Then a couple of weeks later, now Minka's out the door there. So this was, wasn't only a shock to us. And look, Omar Khan and Mike Tomlin, I'm sure don't give too much of a heads up within all that. But this was a pretty big shock to the rest of the team.
Right. I mean, I think generally probably Cam Hayward gets a heads up on some of these things or is at least sort of in the loop, whether that's recruiting Russell Wilson last year or just some of the big major moves. Derek Harmon, I'm sure they discussed that with Cam Hayward. What do you think about this kid? What's your take on him? But I'm betting Fitzpatrick was out of nowhere because there
Right.
was no rumors about this. I know all the reporters say after the fact, or there were whispers and Jerry Dudulak saying, I'm not surprised. Listen, nobody for a second mentioned Minkah Fitzpatrick's name as a trade candidate. So I think I'll call BS on virtually all of that. More reporting has come out because I think, Dave, the most interesting aspect of this trade is what compelled Pittsburgh to trade Minkah Fitzpatrick. That is the biggest question that I had immediately after seeing the details of this trade. Adding Ramsey, you understand why the team did that. That had been speculated about some. Adding Jonnu Smith, same thing there. According to Jerry Dulac, the long and short of it is that Pittsburgh viewed that Fitzpatrick's lack of playmaking was not matching his salary. And so what it came down to was just simply he was not making the splash plays that his contract needed him to make, and that's why he ultimately was pushed out.
Yeah, but then once again, now you can impact plays more than just interceptions, and we covered the whole Jalen Ramsey not having more than four in a single season and all, but he does a lot of things other than that with the pass breakups, with the ability to blitz off the edge, and man, just the ability. You had the position flexibility with him too, which is really huge that the Steelers are counting on. I know there's been when we've even talked about it, was it how much of the communication stuff and the finger pointing, kind of from people without naming names last year, but then you've had Patrick Queen and a few others come out and say, no, not out of position, not miscommunication. I think to some degree, some of that might have been on Minkah. I do wonder at the core how much of maybe Minkah really just liking being more of a free safety and being able to uh, keep himself tied to the post, so to speak, more times than not. I wonder how much maybe that played into it. But I mean, as we've talked about, and even talked about in the 90 and 30 when we talked about Minkah there, two takeaways over the course of the last 2 years. Missed obviously the 6 games the season prior to last. The tackling suspect that time. And on top of it, I to maybe get this deal done, it had to be a player. If they wanted to hold on to the draft capital, especially stuff for 2026, and not move, because we even talked about what uh if you're just trading Minkah straight up, or if Minkah wasn't involved in this deal, how were they going to get this thing done if it had to include 2026 draft picks? And I think it's become one of the big takeaways from this, I think, has been is that the Steelers have been able to keep their draft capital for 2026, which still opens up a plethora of opportunities for what they may or may not do in the first round of next year's draft and all. So it probably, Minka's name probably came into that because Miami wanted back a player with a marketable name, if you will, a guy that could still make plays potentially in the NFL there. So I do wonder how much of this is going to come out after the fact. Is this solely a miscommunication, missed tackles thing? No. Is this solely a Minkah out of position on a few plays last season? No. Is it mostly because of the playmaking matching the 15.5 million? I suppose yes. But I think there are other layers to that. And look, this team, this is this team knew that they just didn't need to take, as you eloquently put in the post the other day, not just a minor scalpel to this thing. They decided they needed to sledgehammer this thing up unless they wanted along the same lines of the same results.
Right now, you're over 9,300 2024 snaps you've replaced from last year to this year, which is a massive turnover to that. Minkah Fitzpatrick, your whole quarterback room, George Pickens, etc. The offensive line changes. Some of them expected, some of them not, and this one falls more into the latter camp. I just there's no getting around it. Minkah was not the player that he was in the past in 2024. He was an average Minkah Fitzpatrick, especially by his standards. But I gave him a pass in 2023 because of the injury, because I think he was misused. I think Pittsburgh would be the first to admit to that. He was not put in position to make plays. I won't give that excuse last year, but it is a one-year blip. And just in the way that I was confident Cam Hayward would bounce back in 2024 and proven correct on, I thought Minkah Fitzpatrick had a chance to do so and would do so in 2025. That I believe that star players still in the prime of their careers that are still hard workers and guys that are students of the game, I'm going to bet on those guys. And so that's why I still have faith in Minkah. Not to make this Dolphins depot, but how do you think Minkah does in Miami this year? Do you think he returns to form?
Well, I mean, as we talked about in 90 and 30 rundown on Minkah, we both thought that Minkah could rebound and have a more Minkah-like season. Is that 3, 4, 5 takeaways, pass breakups, maybe a pick six in there? I feel like he can still play ball. I can tell you that. And
Can he play Minkah ball though, which
yeah,
is
I
his
mean that
brand of
obviously
football?
this even though they're probably going to play two different positions, this thing's going to be, and I know the whole Jonnu Smith thing is in there as well too. But this is going to be a stat book measurement by many people of Jalen versus Minkah, right?
Oh, 100%. And just to take that one step further, it's going to be a year of reunions. You're facing the Dolphins later this year. You're facing the Jets in week one. You're facing the Chargers. It's so many ex-Steelers and ex-players facing their former teams. It's going to be literally what we're talking about every single week.
Right. And if Minkah goes out there and has 5, 6 takeaways and looks like the Minkah of 2022 and 2019, and Ramsey, kind of, is less than that, then people are going to say, see, especially if the team doesn't get to the playoffs and doesn't win a playoff game, right?
Sure, yeah, and vice versa. Obviously, if Minkah continues to be quiet and Ramsey and Jonnu Smith are fantastic, then Pittsburgh will look like clear winners.
How do you think that first, and it's going to be interesting when it happens. I don't know when it's going to happen. When Minkah first meets the media and is asked, is he surprised that he was sent back to Miami, and how does he, what one of the key questions I'd ask him is, why do you think the Steelers traded you?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I don't know how he'll answer that. He's a pretty quiet guy. He doesn't say a lot. I don't think he likes talking to the media. It's going to be unavoidable, I'm sure, when he gets to Miami for that first practice when they report July 22nd, or at least for report date. I don't know how their media setup is structured, but I'll be waiting with ears wide open on that one for sure, Dave.
And we know how the Steelers, Omar Khan and Mike Tomlin, are going to answer it. Look, Minka's a fine player. We wish him well. He was a model Pittsburgh Steeler, made a lot of great plays for us, but we just they'll end it with saying, as we say every offseason, we try to look at this team and make it better, top to bottom, any way we can, because we're attempting to win the Super Bowl, and that's all that we're going to get, and we'll write it 118 different way that we have written it the 117 previous times.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I can already envision Omar Khan saying we just saw a chance to get better, and we did it. And I mean, literally what you said, we just rubber stamped that to Omar Khan whenever he speaks. I don't know if I wonder how Mike Tomlin will talk about it, because he doesn't he gives you a little bit more sometimes than what Omar Khan does, which is very standard boilerplate type answers. So Tomlin's perspective, for a guy that obviously loved Minkah Fitzpatrick, I think back to 2019. Remember that NFL Films clip when Minkah had first gotten there and Tomlin's pregame talking to some coach and saying, "See this Minkah guy, man, this is the guy." I think maybe made an Ed Reed comparison. So those guys have a lot of history, obviously. So it'll be interesting to hear all the commentary from Pittsburgh's side, but especially from Minkah himself.
Yeah, man, I remember the pro day. They knew they had no shot at Minkah during the pro day, but there's Mike Tomlin and Minkah Fitzpatrick standing side by side, right?
Right, exactly. And you can say the same about Jalen Ramsey. Whenever he came out, they knew they weren't going to get Jalen Ramsey, and now Jalen Ramsey is Steelers. They were concerned with Ramsey. This is a guy that's been traded 3 times in his career, from Jacksonville to the Rams, from the Rams to Miami, and now from Miami to Pittsburgh. Omar Kelly, a beat guy for the Dolphins, called Ramsey a mercenary, a guy that just goes place to place, looks for his money. Then when things don't go well, he wants out. Is there a concern about that? Maybe not immediately, but down the road with Jalen Ramsey?
Not immediately, no. I mean, he's going to get a little bit more money, it sounds like, here in Pittsburgh. He's probably going to have a defined role, obviously, probably excited to play for a different head coach, and one in Mike Tomlin. I think the initial courtship, marriage, however you want to call it, in 2025 will be fine, as long as the Steelers are winning some games and Ramsey's getting, but is he a mercenary at his core? Yeah. Does he really care about the helmet that he wears overall? I don't think so. Overall, yeah, he obviously likes the postseason accolades and will be looking to get a few of those in Pittsburgh. I think the big question obviously will come, and we talked about this the other day. He's obviously going to be under contract beyond this year. There's probably not going to be any guaranteed money for any future years. Whether or not he remains in Pittsburgh will depend first and foremost how he plays, and that's obvious. And then second, if he has a great season, is he going to say, "I'm going to need even more money now," or send me on my way to somebody else that'll give me my money, because I have no problem switching helmets.
Right. Yeah, it won't be an issue this year, but in off seasons beyond, because you hope Ramsey's a Steeler for more than just one season, even though this will basically be year to year in terms of how Pittsburgh controls things, and they can probably exit that contract essentially whenever they want after this year, correct?
It's sad. Yeah. Once again, I think there's going to be a roster bonus or an option bonus or something, dude. They'll have to make a decision on him at some point in time. I can't remember if it's March or August or something along those lines, but they're, that's a bridge that will gladly cross, after this season. But, whether or not he remains in Pittsburgh, first and foremost, depends on how he plays in 2025.
Gotcha. And we should note that, while not confirmed by the team, Jalen Ramsey sent out a tweet, an Instagram photo yesterday showing him wearing number 5. It was a Steelers number 5 jersey with his name on the back of it. Wouldn't be a surprise if that is his number in Pittsburgh. He wore that in Miami. He wore that in LA whenever the NFL relaxed its rules to allow defensive backs to wear single digits. So safe bet he'll wear number 5 that was previously worn by Deshaun Jameson at defensive back and punter Cameron Johnston. At the least, Jameson will have to switch his number, and then Johnson eventually will too if those guys both make the roster, which they likely will.
Yeah, and if Cameron Johnston ends up being the Steelers punter, there's got to be some cash exchange there, right? This time?
I mean, Waitman gave it for free to Rodgers, so is that the precedent that's been set? I mean, if I'm Johnson, I'm getting what I can get for my number 5 for sure. I'm with you.
I'm trying to, yeah. Kudos to Waitman and all like that, but just happy to be on the team. I appreciate the attitude that he had on that. But Jalen's got some money too now, and I want a car or something.
What number is Johnston going to go to? I know this is the least important question I'll ask about all of this, but what is even available? Because Waitman went to 3, 2's taken, 4 is Metcalf, Queen has 6.
Well, he'd wear 3 if Waitman doesn't make it.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, that's a fair point.
The guy I think I do feel for here though is Deshaun Jameson, because he's going to have to probably sport 39 now, and then now these kids that don't keep up with that don't go to Steelers Depot every day are going to think maybe that's Minkah out there, and they're going to be calling Minkah.
Hey, at least he's getting some attention. If I'm Deshaun Jameson, someone's calling my name incorrectly, albeit. But yeah, that's true, because I mean, unless he doubles up on a number somewhere, but there's already a lot of duplicates in the 30s. Right. So, good question. Yeah, we'll play some number shuffling this year, and we'll get you details on that when it all becomes official. Tucker Addington, the long snapper, by the way, we're in 45. I know people were waiting with bated breath to know that, but 45 per the team website.
All right. People say you guys act like Jonnu Smith's an undrafted free agent added here. And we've talked a lot about it. Any additional thoughts on Jonnu Smith? I mean, this is a name that we talked about before he got traded, and the plausibility and probability and everything. Like, we weren't shocked that he ended up a Pittsburgh Steeler, I guess, overall here, but just the overall feel and fit of him in this Arthur Smith offense.
Right. We've talked about Jonnu Smith less post-trade because we talked about him a ton when all the rumors were speculating and percolating around. So Ramsey and Minkah is a fresher conversation for us. But obviously, I like the addition, the fit, the versatility, his familiarity with Arthur Smith in this system. He'll be used as an offensive weapon, not just a tight end, the 13 personnel heaviness. You're going to see that probably magnified. And as I mentioned, a lot of 13 personnel usage last year, but it was ineffective overall in terms of results. You're going to have a really strong trio of Freiermuth and Washington and Jonnu Smith. So yeah, you certainly, they gave him a pretty big extension. I mean, it's just a 1-year deal, but $12 million, that's more than what Freiermuth got, right? So, I mean, that says something. I mean, the question is, how is Division of Labor looking at tight end this year? Who's going to catch more passes, Dave? Freiermuth or Jonnu Smith?
Yeah, that's a great question. And once again, Jonnu Smith coming off a very, very good year, and we had to talk already about Freiermuth and kind of what the expectations are out of him, and could he have a career year? And you look at what Jonnu Smith had, 88 receptions for 884 yards and 8 touchdowns last season. Are both of these guys, Freiermuth and Jonnu Smith, going to hit at least 70 receptions? It doesn't feel like it. They might have to, especially if this team doesn't go out and add another wide receiver and all like that. But both of them are going to obviously be used. I think the biggest, most interesting thing here is when you look at Aaron Rodgers and the usage of tight ends over the years. Yes, he has had some decent ones and some good ones and used them in the passing game. But will this be a season where Aaron Rodgers is going to have to get more used to using a tight end in the passing game than any other year in his entire career?
It's a good question. It's probably a worthwhile study and question for Clayton Echard, how much 13 personnel as his offense is used throughout his career. I know he was in Matt LaFleur's system, which has some similarities with Arthur Smith's system, but I think the LaFleur system is a lot more receiver based and less tight end heavy than Arthur Smith's scheme is run. So yeah, I think either way, Rodgers will be leaning on tight ends a lot because Pittsburgh's full of them right now and they'll be using them.
Right. So that would be an interesting study for Clayton Echard is, Aaron Rodgers' usage, of and target percentage and catch percentage of Aaron Rodgers and his tight ends throughout his career. And another one would be the 12 and the 13 personnel.
To answer my question, I still think Freiermuth catches more passes this year, just being more entrenched in this offense and just his consistency overall. Basically, he's caught 60-plus passes every single season he's been healthy in his career. I think Jonnu Smith will be right behind in that 45 to 50 reception range, and so that's kind of my expectation of how the numbers are going to bear out.
Can both of them hit the 60 reception mark?
Can they? I
Yes.
suppose, but Smith had never been above 50 receptions until last year, and he put up big numbers last year, 88 catches for nearly 900 yards, 8 touchdowns. A little bit of that was because of the Dolphins' quarterback play. They had issues there. There were quarterbacks throwing shorter, checking it down because Tua had gotten hurt. I think he had didn't Jalen Waddle miss some time or Tyreek Hill miss some time? The offense was not what it needed to be last year. It was not the perimeter vertical game that at its peak that offense is supposed to be run like. And so I think those numbers were a bit inflated last year. I think Smith kind of quote unquote comes back to earth, regresses into his more normal 45 to 50 reception range.
All right, and he had 111 targets last season, and over the previous 2 seasons, one with Atlanta, one with the previous one with New England, he had 108 total targets.
Want to look at what Smith's numbers were with Tua. I don't know if there's an easy way to do that on the fly because you had Tyler Huntley start 5 games. You had Pittsburgh Skylar Thompson start a game. And those guys, how often were they looking for the tight end in those contests? I'd like to look at the numbers on that just to see where Smith's numbers are a bit boosted by some of these backup quarterbacks hitting the short game and hitting Jonnu Smith in those contests.
All right, so he's more than a number 3 wide receiver, and he's more than just a slight upgrade over Michael Pruitt, right?
Yeah, I don't know where Jerry Dulac was coming from with that comment, to be honest with you. So, again, some of this is how the pieces fit, but I think there's excitement there. In terms of what was available, this is going to be your best offensive pass-catching weapon you probably could have added this offseason. Could you still add a Gabe Davis? Yes, and I think Pittsburgh certainly could. It would not be shocking at all if 2 days before training camp, Gabe Davis was brought on board too, and I would be all for that for presumably the minimum, but this is going to be a big upgrade to the pass game.
Offense got better with the addition of Jonnu Smith to this team.
Right, and I think Jeremy Fowler was talking about the coaches are excited about his yak ability, and that's a big thing under Arthur Smith, run after catch. I mean, this guy, you had posted the clip of him, how many years back, the toss? I mean, he's running like a running back. How many years back was that a recent clip?
I mean, that was
in
Tennessee days.
Yeah, okay, that was a while back. But still, I mean, there's a skill set there that's pretty unique, and his size and his yak ability, those are all tenets and core to the Arthur Smith system. It's why, of course, they've been together for so long and now reunited in Pittsburgh.
Just to be clear, neither one of us are advocating a lot of tosses to Jonnu Smith,
yes.
Right?
And maybe not tosses in general, considering last year got a little frustrating,
Okay.
but there's certainly an interesting skill set that Smith brings.
Right. When we talk about stuff like that, it instantly gets turned into Dave and Alex are thinking that they're going to run the toss 3 times a game to Jonnu Smith, but that's not the case. I just a clip that I came across and found it quite and he gained a lot of yards on it. It was blocked up pretty good, and he got through there, broke some tackles and all, and had a huge gain there. We'll talk more about the contracts maybe on Friday or Monday when it comes to Jalen Ramsey and Jonnu Smith, because I don't think we have any more useful information on either one of those two and the cap hits and all like that.
Smith broke 8 tackles last year, which I don't know exactly where that ranks among tight ends, but feels like it's probably up there for a tight end to break 8 tackles, broke 9 in 2022 while with the Patriots.
All right, what else do we have to talk about, Brother Alex?
Well, the thing I was going to bring up on Monday before all hell broke loose was Tyler Boyd, who had spoken over the weekend. I forget all the details. Was there a softball game? Was that the
I don't know if it was
day?
at a camp or something. I don't know, but it seemed
Some
like
event.
Some event maybe back in town or something.
And was asked, would you like to play for Pittsburgh? Of course, he's a Western PA native. There was a lot of talks last year. Could Boyd reunite and come home to Pittsburgh? And Boyd said, yes, absolutely. I would love to play for the Steelers. And Mark Cabali had referenced there's been some conversations, or at least there were conversations in the offseason with Tyler Boyd. I assume that ship has sailed now that Robert Woods was brought in. I mean, I don't know what Boyd would possibly offer that Robert Woods wouldn't as a slot, kind of gritty over the middle underneath receiver. So I assume they would probably, those conversations with Boyd took place as they were taking with Robert Woods, and then Woods signed first. So I don't really see the value of bringing in Boyd, but he did make that comment, which would have been the story until Monday's news.
Right. Look, Tyler Boyd's a guy now. I think at this point you just have in a Rolodex should something happen there, and I would imagine too. Robert Woods wants to continue to look at what's out there. Probably thinks he can play. Probably thinks he's worth more than minimum. Going to watch what happens. Look, somebody's going to go down on some team at the wide receiver position throughout the training camp and the preseason. So I think he's just going to wait out there, see what his options are, and the only way I see him becoming a member of the Pittsburgh Steelers is if Roman Wilson or Robert Woods or Calvin Austin, one of those guys go down.
And even then, what is the role and value when you have all these tight ends that are going to do some of the underneath receiving, Frymouth being a third down chain mover? You know, if somebody goes down, sure, maybe the door opens, but I just don't see the point in Boyd, who's 31, game clearly declining, ineffective in Tennessee last year. Granted, it was a poor offense, not exactly a potent, dangerous group overall, but yeah, just don't see the point.
Yeah, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that predict that this next week that we're not going to be writing up Robert Woods signing with the Steelers. I have been wrong.
Robert Woods or Tyler Boyd?
I mean Tyler Boyd. That Tyler Boyd's not going to sign. I'm looking at the wide receiver depth chart right now. I mean, look, you got a guy like Ben Skoranek that you gave a 2-year deal to and can do a lot of things for you. Obviously, not going to play a lot of offensive snaps, but a guy that this team really respects on special teams, and you got to have those guys, and we'll figure out the gunner situation as this thing goes along, but you got to figure that this team, at least in their heads, carving out a roster spot for him. Got DK Metcalf, obviously Calvin Austin, Roman Wilson's not going anywhere, Robert Woods more than likely to make this roster. I mean, you get to 5 and then potentially even 6 wide receivers at most there. It's hard to find a spot for another guy at this point, unless it is somebody that's a field stretcher, much in the form of Gabe Davis.
Do you think Davis would want to come here, or do you think he would look at the landscape? He's taken other visits to the Giants, the Niners, the Saints, and say, I just don't see my role in Pittsburgh. I'll go sign somewhere else.
I think I continue my rehab if I'm him at this point, and I sit out there like like Boyd and say, yeah, okay, I've got an offer here I can take. I got an offer there I can take, and it's only going to be the minimum anyway because of the money that I'm owed. Maybe I can offset this sum with a bigger and get a better opportunity, and then get myself in a better position for free agency on a 1-year deal with another team. So, I would they sign him today if he'd sign a deal for a minimum value? I think the answer is yes to that, but I don't think Gabe Davis is ready to sign yet.
Ultimately, do you think Gabe Davis signs with Pittsburgh at some point this season?
It feels like a no overall, barring any injury happening.
I've had a weird gut instinct he will, but then I look at the depth chart and say, where does he fit? And if I'm Gabe Davis, as you said, why not wait for an injury or go to one of the other teams that I visited and go there instead. So I don't know really where I sit. I kind of have a weird, my gut says yes, my brain says no. I'm really hedging my bets here. I know I'm doing the classic Alex Kozora thing, never be wrong, but I'll go with you. I'll say no.
Okay.
Speaking of Ben Skoranek, he is in Malibu. I know lost in all the trade talk is that the Steelers receivers and Aaron Rodgers were going to work out in Malibu, California this week, and they appear to be there right now. We saw Calvin Austin post a very nice Instagram photo of him out there. Pat Frymouth is there. Skoranek is there, apparently on Skoranek's Instagram. They're in playing basketball, and Rodgers is throwing lobs to Ben Skoranek, and he's dunking it. So that's what's happening this week over there in California.
Hopefully we'll get a team picture much in the way that Russell Wilson, that thing surfaced last year with all those guys out there in San Diego. That way we can go one by one and take attendance out there. And hopefully it's
You want to know the quarterbacks are there. I know you're dying to know if the other quarterbacks are there.
Yeah, I am. And I think everybody should, because I think that would be good to have happen out there as well, too. So, look, Aaron said they were going to get the guys together. It's happening. Now we just wait to see what the attendance is out there. How many running backs are out? Who all is out there?
Right, and I'm looking at Instagrams right now for the quarterbacks to try to see if any of the others are posting anything, and I don't see anything on the stories or timelines, Skylar Thompson or Will Howard, but we'll see. We'll keep an eye on it.
All right.
All right, Dave, we'll get to our 90 and 30 on the other side of our interview with Jonas Shaffer, who covers the Baltimore Ravens for the Baltimore Banner. Be sure to follow him on Twitter at Jonas_Shaffer, last name spelled Shaffer. Dave, let's take a pause and come back with Jonas.
Okay, welcome back to the Terrible Podcast. It is Wednesday, and as promised, we are making our way around the AFC North this week, going over the other three AFC North teams. And on Monday, we talked about the Cincinnati Bengals with Jay Morrison, and today have a friend of the show back on, Jonas Shaffer. Jonas covers the Baltimore Ravens for the Baltimore Banner. You can go to thebaltimorebanner.com to read his work there. You should already be following Jonas on Twitter at Jonas_Shaffer. That's Shaffer. You're probably familiar, probably read some of his work and some of the stuff maybe that we linked to during the whole Justin Tucker thing that went on. Jonas and the rest of the Baltimore Banner staff did a great job on covering that as well, too. So with that, on this Wednesday, Jonas, welcome back to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex. Happy Wednesday.
Thanks, guys. It's a delight to be back with you. How you doing?
Doing well, Jonas. Let's, I guess, start with the Tucker stuff. And I know you had a lot of key reporting on that as well, too. I guess overall, you're not surprised with what ultimately transpired with Justin Tucker ultimately getting released by the Ravens. And then we saw the suspension come out recently as well, too. Just kind of your thoughts on that, how maybe the Ravens handled it. Are you surprised it took as long as it did maybe for them to release him? So just your thoughts on the whole Justin Tucker situation.
Yeah, I guess I'll start with the last thing that happened, the 10-game release. I was a little bit surprised that it happened as quickly as it did, because when you think of some of the other investigations that have happened, by the NFL into these possible infractions of the personal conduct policy, they can kind of tend to drag on. You think of Von Miller getting suspended, I think last year when he was with the Bills for something that had happened like 9-10 months before. You think of the Jameis Winston situation with the Uber driver, I think it was. I think that took a while to investigate. And, our investigation was not just one, sole alleged assailant. It was a lot of women in the Baltimore area. So I think it was heartening in some respect that the NFL came to its conclusion as quickly as it did. But of course, the fact that it was a 10-game ban suggested that their findings were consistent with ours, which were overall pretty horrifying. So I wasn't surprised that the Ravens released him. I wasn't surprised that they released him when they did, which was basically as they were kind of onboarding these rookie kickers. I think the thing that I took issue with was the wording in the statement that was, thanking Justin Tucker basically for his tenure. And of course, before all this was uncovered, he was and still might be a guy who was on a Hall of Fame track, Ravens Ring of Honor candidate. But I think considering where we are kind of in the culture, speaking personally, it was disappointing to see him be thanked for what he had done when what he had done was allegedly a very, very terrible series of behavior. I think that's something that you can tell a guy in private and just kind of keep your mouth shut in public. But, what's done is done. It wouldn't surprise me if he has a public image rehabilitation after he's retired, in the vein of Ray Rice, who obviously left Baltimore under similarly dire circumstances, but it wasn't long before he was, welcomed back to Baltimore for Ravens games, being, let walk around Ravens training camp, speaking to the team. So, it's obviously not been a great off the field track record for the Ravens when it comes to this kind of thing, alleged misconduct toward women. But, time heals all wounds, I guess, which is, it can be a good thing and a bad thing, I suppose, depending on who you're most interested in seeing kind of get over this thing.
Do you think he's done in the NFL? I know it's hard to kind of speculate on these things. Do you think this is it for him?
I don't think. I think it's unlikely that he comes back this year because of the 10-game ban. He can start serving that without being on a team, which is a nice little plus for him. He doesn't have to wait for that clock to start after he joins another team. But you just look at the contenders in the NFL who might need a kicker and might be willing to take on that kind of baggage. There aren't a whole lot of teams. I mean, ironically, obviously the Ravens have their own tricky field goal situation, but I don't think they're going back to that Justin Tucker well anytime soon. So I think with the length of the suspension, with the severity of the allegations, with the fact that he hasn't really done a whole lot of public mea culpas for what allegedly transpired, I think 2026 is more likely than 2025. And I do think that at some point, just kind of like what we saw with the Bills, I believe, and Matt Araiza, there's going to be some team with an appetite for, a very talented individual who probably will not cost a lot of money. So I think at some point, probably in the next couple of years, if not as soon as next year, hey, maybe if not as soon as December, January, Justin Tucker will have a new NFL team. He's not completely washed yet. There's still some power in that leg. He made basically every kick that he had for the Ravens after he came back from the bye week last year. I think some NFL GM, some ownership, some head coach will be desperate enough that they can kind of explain away what might have happened in Baltimore and say, we want you on our team. Here's your opportunity.
All right, staying with the kicker theme there for so long, boy, Justin Tucker, it was like, man, the Ravens crossed the 50-yard line. There's 3 points right there. A guy that you almost had to talk about every game as a Steelers fan before going into that game, just because he was money for so long, especially from far out. In comes Tyler Loop via the draft. A lot of people are saying this guy is going to be just as money as Justin Tucker was. Now, obviously, saying that and doing it are two different things. What are your early thoughts on Tyler Loop?
Yeah, I mean, you guys might can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think until this past year in Pittsburgh, where the Ravens obviously lost, I don't think Tucker had missed a kick in Pittsburgh since like his rookie year. So it's probably a welcome change of pace for Steelers fans. But Luke had some ups and downs in OTAs and in minicamp. He's obviously got a booming leg. I think it took Tucker some time to develop his leg strength to the point where he could be a guy capable of nailing the longest kick, the longest field goal in NFL history. I think, talking to some folks around the kicking industry, I think Luke comes prepackaged with that kind of strong, booming leg. The problem is just, mechanics, accuracy, consistency. He missed, I don't think he ever got above 90% in his 4 seasons at Arizona. My understanding is that from talking to his special teams coach there this last year was more so a function of the snapping and holding operation than it was on his leg. But still, for him to at one point, I think during one OTA practice, go like 4 for 7 or 5 for 8, certainly raised some alarm bells in Baltimore. And his kicking accuracy in training camp is going to be watched like a hawk, because you look at this offense, you look at this defense, it is kind of Super Bowl ready. But the last thing the Ravens need is for a unreliable rookie kicker to be kicking them in the butt because he can't make a 35-yard field goal or because he can't make a 42-yard field goal. That's the Ravens at some point, probably multiple times a season, are going to be in a game that comes down right to the end. And if you can't rely on Loop the way that you could rely on Tucker in the fourth quarter and overtime for so many years, then it could be this team's undoing.
And some of those close games likely to come against Pittsburgh, considering how they historically operate. Jonas, there's a lot Dave and I want to talk to you about Jair Alexander and Mark Andrews in the inside linebacker room, but I want to go back to Justin Tucker just for one more question. You guys, Baltimore Banner, broke that story. As much as you're able to talk about it, can you take me through how that story came about, how you vetted it, and what that story's legacy do you think ultimately will be?
Yeah, it's a good question. I was tangential to the story because we wanted to create this firewall between the Ravens reporters and the Ravens team because of just how massive a story it became. So one of our incredible crime reporters, Baltimore City reporters, Justin Fenton, who, if any of you guys have ever read the book We Own the City or watched the HBO adaptation of that show, he was the author of that. He was a I think Pulitzer Prize winner at the Baltimore Sun when he was still working there. Just a great reporter. I believe he was at a Baltimore barber shop and overheard some allegations or some talk that Justin Tucker was, not this Mr. Nice Guy. He was not this upstanding citizen. One thing led to another. You start pulling on some strings. Another of our reporters, Julie Sharper, who has, a pretty extensive list of massages that she's worked with in the Baltimore area. Just start pulling on some thread, and you find out that there are all these massage therapists in the Baltimore area who have worked with Justin Tucker and who have not had nice things to say about them. I mean, before this reporting even really began in earnest, if you had, searched on Twitter, Justin Tucker massage or like Justin Tucker, I don't want to sell your guys' fine podcast with naughty language, but there was plenty of stuff out there that was completely antithetical to this notion of just the Justin Tucker that we all knew and mostly beloved. So it came together in like a span of maybe 3 or 4 weeks. I mean, one part of me is grateful that the Ravens were out of the playoffs by then, because if we dropped this at the same time, but with the Ravens preparing for the Super Bowl, we would have been, kicked out of town for holding on to this and dropping it during the most important game in over a decade. But fortunately, that didn't happen. Fortunately, this was just a offseason story. But you print the first edition, and then you have more people come out. You print the second edition, more people come out, and it just became this very unique story in that it wasn't being owned by the major stakeholders in the NFL. It was local journalism at its best. And, unsurprisingly, it just became, I think, probably the most read story in Baltimore Banner history. And, for a kind of young green newsroom, it definitely helped us put our name out there. And again, the fact that the NFL has seemingly corroborated all of our findings based on the length of the NFL suspension, hopefully it's earned some goodwill with the community.
Yeah, the local journalism at its best. That's a great way to frame that. And then related to that, so they released Justin Tucker, but then Baltimore drafts Mike Green, who had 2 sexual assault allegations throughout his high school, college career. How does the team square the Tucker situation, but then draft Mike Green? What are they saying about that?
I think they're done saying things about it. Eric DeCosta got pressured about it pretty relentlessly after day 2 of that draft. They said that they'd done their homework. They said they had sources at Virginia, at Marshall, who all came back with glowing reports about Mike Green, which tracks with what I reported. And I talked to his former head coach at Marshall, who now I believe is at Southern Miss. Had no problem reaching him. Had no problem, getting all kinds of glowing praise from him about Mike Green's character, about certainly his quality as a professional football player. I talked to his defensive line coach at Marshall, who basically compared their relationship to that of between a father and a son. He would let Mike Green hang around their young daughter, their young son. When Mike Green got drafted, the defensive line coach, had a FaceTime with Mike Green and his son, and it was just like, the happiest moment in the kid's life. But then you talk to the high school coach, who also had positive things to say about Mike, and he says that the Ravens, as far as he can recall, never reached out to him. It's like, can you really say that you did your full homework when one of these allegations happened in high school and you never talked to maybe the adults in that room who Mike Green knew the best? It's possible that they talked to everyone around that situation, and that they came back satisfied. But, again, this is third-hand knowledge, but we had James Foster on our podcast after the draft. And James, used to work for, I think, the 33rd team, used to work for A to Z Sports, has some connections in the scouting industry. And he told us that he'd heard from some NFL team that had interviewed Mike Green during the pre-draft process. And, of course, they had to ask Mike about the allegations. And what James told us, that as relayed by this anonymous NFL official was that basically it doesn't matter what happened, which, if true, is a pretty interesting thing to say. Not sure that that would be the kind of response I would want from someone who's been uh, allegedly involved with this kind of conduct. Again, it's third hand. It's me telling you about it. Who knows
Mhm.
where this kind of game of telephone actually starts and where it ends? But certainly the fact that this was a guy who, Dane Brugler at the Athletic, you listen to him before the draft.
Right.
He's citing all these anonymous scouts and front office officials who say that they've come away more impressed with Mike Green than they were expecting to, given the scope and the severity of these allegations. But for him to still fall as late in that second round as he did, I think there's a lot that still is probably out there that would explain better why this super talented FBS leading sack king would become available to the Ravens that late in the second round.
Right, definitely first round talent that fell because of that. To talk about more of the recent here and now, Jonas, Jair Alexander just signing seems like Lamar Jackson, a big influence there. How does Baltimore plan to make the pieces fit between Alexander, Marlon Humphrey, Nate Wiggins, who's playing slot? Is that more? I mean, Humphrey's obviously played in the slot quite a bit. How do they see everything fitting together?
Yeah, I think probably when they're in nickel personnel, which obviously, like the rest of the NFL, has become their usual quote unquote base personnel. I think it's fair to expect Marlon in the slot, and then assuming good health, Nate Wiggins on one side, Jair Alexander on another. Nate primarily played on the right side of the field if you're pretending you're the quarterback and just kind of scanning the field. And Jair Alexander has experience as a left-sided cornerback, as a right-sided cornerback, so I don't think it's going to matter what side you ultimately line him up on. I guess the wrinkle that I'm most interested in is when it is base personnel, when it's actually base personnel, which I think with the Steelers' recent moves, the Ravens can expect to be playing a lot of when they play Pittsburgh. You know, it's safe to assume that Marlon will be one outside cornerback, but who's going to be the other? I think probably the odds-on favorite would be Nate Wiggins, just because he is this ascendant talent, because he did, I think, finish last year extremely well. But Jair Alexander is a two-time All-Pro. Even if he doesn't have that elite athleticism that made him that first-round pick all those years ago, I still think, just looking at his film recently, from those games where he was playing with Green Bay, I still think he can be a very, very good player. Just his ability to come up and press you and get in your chest is something that Nate Wiggins does not have. So that competition, if you want to call it that, I think is going to be really interesting. And then, with what's happened with the Ravens secondary depth, with them drafting Malachi Starks in the first round, but losing Ardarius Washington, you don't really have that obvious three safety setup that let the Ravens, put Kyle Hamilton in the slot where he was so unbelievably effective in 2023. So it could be that the Ravens, by virtue of having beefed up their secondary in this way, have also made it a little bit less flexible. But again, if you are, sacrificing integrity for the sake of creativity, if you're saying that we want to play Marlon Humphrey at safety occasionally so we can get Kyle Hamilton in the slot, might not make a whole lot of sense. Just kind of doing stuff for shits and giggles. So it could be that this is a more traditional defense in terms of what it shows before the snap and how that converts to after the snap. But again, if you're saying that because you can get reliable man-to-man coverage from those three cornerbacks and those two deep safeties, I think that's a trade-off that pretty much every NFL defense coordinator would be willing to make.
Jonas, from it's been a weird offseason for Steeler fans and covering the team, especially from how they've done things for numerous years over the past. It's been really out of the norm. This is not your grandpa's Steelers, the way Omar Khan has run things, obviously. We just saw the trade a couple of days ago, and Minkah Fitzpatrick out the door, and Ramsey in, and Jonnu Smith in from 30,000 feet from the outsider. Looking at the Ravens, this is almost, at least to me, seems like business as usual. They let some free agents walk. They played a compensatory exploratory value pick game, better than any team in the NFL. They got some more, obviously some great value as far as that goes. They re-sign a few of their own. They get Derrick Henry signed to a new deal. A couple other guys, I think Bateman gets an extension within there. They go into the draft. They draft a lot of players that Alex and I have our eyes on for the Steelers. It just works out that way all the time there. Has this pretty much been I guess, quote unquote, normal off season for the Ravens, if you will?
Yeah, I think so. Well, other than the first two topics that we just discussed,
Right.
no one expected Justin Tucker to be off this team, even with the struggles that he had last year, because they said even at the end of last year that Justin Tucker was still their guy. And because of that, and because of what was reported and what the Ravens did, I don't think anyone expected them to touch a guy like Mike Green. But here he is in Baltimore, maybe being the last piece for that pass rush. But other than that, yeah, I mean, it's been business as usual, locking down your own to what could be team-friendly deals in the future, uh, bringing in a big draft class, bringing in a big undrafted free agent class, making uh, those small signings around the margins, getting a Joe Noteboom to be your potential swing tackle, bringing in a John Jenkins to potentially be your Michael Pierce replacement as that nose tech. You know, the only real thing that is still on that to-do list is getting a new deal done with Lamar Jackson. I know it sounds crazy because it feels like we just got out of the end. Well, for one, it feels like we just got that old extension, signed and finalized, but also all of the discovery and reporting by Pablo Torre on that NFL collusion
Right.
meeting has I think breathed new life into what a potential second big money extension, big money negotiation with Lamar Jackson could look like. But his salary cap hit is set to spike to a pretty extreme level next year. I think it's about 43 right now, and I think it would jump to like 60 or 70 million next year. And that is not the kind of spectrum that you want to be on. I think if you're Eric DaCosta, if you're a Ravens fan, so I think there is a pretty urgent need for the Ravens front office to get a new deal done to smooth things out a little bit, because there are a lot of other matters pending right now in Ravens extension world. You want to get a deal done with Kyle Hamilton before the market jumps another bid. You want to get a deal done with Tyler Linderbaum before the market jumps another bid. So, but it's tough to kind of do the math on those 4 or 5 year extensions until you have the big tentpole piece in Lamar Jackson locked down under contract. So we're going to see, over this next month or so, if there's any traction there. Lamar is, usually kind of posted up in South Florida. Eric DaCosta likes to, enjoy what little vacation he has and take some time for himself. But it might be to his benefit if the Ravens can arrange a kind of, confab in South Florida and try to get a deal done. Obviously, there is a pretty handy framework with what Josh Allen got done in Buffalo. Just add a little bit of money to that, and potentially you have the structure for a new extension. But it's unfortunately never that simple with Lamar Jackson. So he doesn't like getting asked about these contract questions. We're probably not going to get the chance to talk to Eric DaCosta until right before the season. So it's really anyone's guess as to whether the Ravens will have gotten a deal done with Lamar that makes him the NFL's highest paid player, because I think that is the expectation. John Harbaugh said as much, but we just don't know what that looks like or when it's going to come down the pipeline.
We've had a lot of conversations this offseason about what makes a Super Bowl caliber team, and especially when it comes to the Steelers. And we've had a lot of our emailers and listeners chime in on that as well too. And it goes without saying that the Ravens should be considered a Super Bowl caliber team this year. But if you look at this team, where is the weakness right now? A weakness or two, if any, as this team prepares for training camp that you think might be one of the bigger questions when it comes to this 2025 Ravens team?
I mean, not to sound like a homer or anything, but there really aren't a lot of weaknesses. I think special teams is coming off a shocking season. You look at DVOA, the expectation in Baltimore is that they are going to be top 5 every year, and for a while they were, but last year I think they dropped all the way to 21st. I don't think they had a single top 10 unit in special teams by DVOA in any of those 5 phases, which again is pretty shocking. So I think Jordan Stout is solid as punter. We don't know what Tyler Loop is going to be. We don't know how their punt return or kickoff returner situation is going to get settled. But you just trust that with John Harbaugh's expertise and his background in special teams, that phase can get back on track again. Their kicking woes probably cost them a game or two last year. Certainly, that loss at Pittsburgh was not Justin Tucker's finest moment. But elsewhere, you wonder, is there, when it gets to the playoffs, is Daniel Faalele or whoever is going to be left guard, probably Angie Voorhees, going to be a capable starter rather than, can he be a plus starter rather than just a capable starter? There's a lot of agitation, I think, among Ravens fans that Faalele is still going to be their right guard next year. You expect him to be, as a converted tackle, better in year 4 than he was in year 3. Can Ronnie Stanley stay healthy for another full season like he did last year? Does the pass rush have a really A plus? Do they have someone like the rest of the AFC North has, just someone that you really have to game plan around? There's not a Hendrickson that we know of on this roster. There's not a Watt. There's not a Garrett. And you look at the Ravens' playoff loss to Buffalo and other playoff losses. I think that pass rush problem has really reared its ugly head at some unfortunate times. They haven't been a defense that turns over opposing offenses in the playoffs. I think the turnovers, the takeaways to giveaways ratio in the Lamar Jackson era is pretty shocking, honestly. And I know that's not really something you can teach up. It's just something you kind of hope for, but it is something that the Ravens have talked about needing to improve. So really, there are just certain units, certain aspects on this team that if you're a Ravens fan, are hoping will finally have this breakthrough either in the regular season or in the playoffs. And there's not a guy under more pressure with all that than Lamar, just because he has become this transcendent force in the regular season, but come playoff time, he has been a little bit more ordinary. And I mean, just when I was thinking about hopping on this podcast with you guys, I do think there are a lot of parallels between where Lamar is in his, not career, but in his public persona and what he needs to accomplish, and Mike Tomlin, because they are both guys who are on Hall of Fame tracks, but they are being judged by what they've done, and what they've done in the postseason is just not cutting it. Lamar needs a Super Bowl breakthrough in the worst way, and Mike Tomlin needs a playoff win breakthrough in the worst way. And for whatever reason, they just haven't been able to get it done. And because of who they are and what they represent, the arguments around them can get kind of nasty and, in some cases, politically charged.
Speaking with Jonas Schaefer, who covers the Ravens, a couple more questions for you, Jonas. Derrick Henry, 325 carries last year, massive success, gets the extension in the offseason. Is there any intent, though, to manage his reps into his 30s with all the wear and tear? It feels like this guy never slows down, but is there any goal of trying to reduce his workload a little bit so he stays fresh, start to finish?
I think they'd probably be happy having the same kind of workload that they did last year. He wasn't great in that loss to Buffalo, but I don't think that was on him. I think that was just the Bills defense bowing up and the offensive line not getting the kind of push. I mean, he's a guy who, I'm sure you guys all know, just is an obsessive weightlifter, just works out constantly, gets better over the course of the season, gets better over the course of the game. So I think the fact that he is going to be in this backfield, splitting carries with Lamar, splitting time with Justice Hill, who's the third down back, probably splitting more carries with Keaton Mitchell, who it looks like finally has that speed back and should be a nice change of pace option. will there be some games where the Ravens rely on Derrick Henry for 25, 30 carries? Probably. But I think just because of how good this team should be and because of the options that this rushing game presents, both like in structure and out of structure with the read option and everything, I don't think there's a whole lot of fear that Derrick Henry, even at this age, is going to quote unquote break down over the course of a season or even a game. So I think the Ravens feel comfortable with his 2024 workload. And, I would much rather, you know, have a running back kind of coming back off the kind of workload that Derrick Henry got last year, as opposed to Saquon Barkley, who was over 400 touches or whatever it was for the Eagles. So I think the Ravens are pretty comfortable. Derrick Henry looks even bigger this preseason. His biceps during OTAs and
Good
minicamp
God.
were huge. I don't know how much benefit that gives for running back, but we'll see. So Derrick Henry is just a guy who continues to defy all expectations, all norms for someone his age. And if I said anything that was pessimistic about what he could do, I would probably just be made to look like a fool, honestly.
Fair enough. Fair enough. My last question for you, then I'll let Dave finish things out. Baltimore made 8 day 3 selections in the draft this year. We talked about Tyler Loop, so putting him aside, any sleeper or immediate impact potential among that group? I was a big fan of Teddy Buchanan. Nias Peoples had some love in draft circles. Any day 3 guys to talk about?
Yeah, it's an interesting group. I mean, usually you can lock in that that pretty much everyone is going to make the 53-man roster. But when you start to do the roster math and you consider this guy's a lock, this guy's a lock, this guy's kind of on the bubble, some of those late round guys might end up on the wrong side of the bubble just because of where this team's depth is. I think it's tough to find, besides Loop, a guy that you would say could have a significant role. I also like Teddy Buchanan, but again, as not everyone takes to the NFL as well as Peyton Wilson does. I mean, the fact that he was able to step in for Pittsburgh last year and have a really nice season as a first-year linebacker is just a huge credit to him and to the Steelers staff because, even Patrick Queen, for as well as he finished his Ravens career, was not all that good over his first 2 years. Trenton Simpson, his replacement, was not good in year 2, especially, in his zone drops. So even though Teddy Buchanan, definitely showed some stuff in pass coverage, definitely has some very fun athletic traits. Just the geography of the NFL game is so different from the geography of the college game. And I think that makes it a really, really tough transition for even linebackers that you like as day 1 or day 2 picks. So maybe Trenton Simpson is not good enough that he can't hold off Teddy Buchanan, but I still think I would put Trenton Simpson as the odds-on favorite to win that linebacker job opposite Roquan. LaJohntay Wester could be a guy that Steelers fans get familiar with as a returner. There was a lot of hype around him because he's coming from that Colorado program, because he has some really nice reps on tape, but he didn't do a whole lot during OTAs and minicamp as a wide receiver. So I think if he comes away from this summer with a job, with a spot on 53, it's probably because he's won the job as the punt returner and maybe a kickoff returner. Again, he could have been up against it mentally, and maybe there is this breakthrough as a receiver. But it seems like the Ravens' top 5 in the wide receiver room is pretty set. So I think if you're talking about a guy who maybe makes an impact, it is Peebles. Not a big guy. Surprisingly fell to the 6th round. I think most people had him, as a 4th rounder, 5th rounder because of what he brought to the table, pass rush wise at Virginia Tech. But if he can be a guy who maybe gives Nnamdi Madubuike a blow on some of those 3rd down reps where you're asking Madubuike to be the anchor, as that 3 tech on 1st and 2nd down, and he's suck and win, and you need someone to come in and be that kind of designated pass rusher. It could be Peebles. He definitely caught my eye with his quickness and his ability to kind of turn the edge on some of those stunts and twists in OTAs and minicamp. But again, this roster has so many guys coming back, so many proved veterans, that beyond those guys that they took over the first couple of days, it's tough for me to say this guy will definitely be a relatively high impact guy for the Ravens in 2025.
Jonas, before I close you out here, obviously an interesting offseason for the Steelers. I'm doubting that you still think they've done enough to be a Super Bowl caliber team. But what do you think about the Steelers offseason to date? Have they done enough to at least maybe win a playoff game? And even so, are they still, despite all these moves, still, by in your opinion, the third best team in the AFC North?
I guess I would say so. We're going to do our, unit by unit breakdown of all the AFC North teams on our Band of Ravens podcast, I think tomorrow. So I'll have a better sense for just where they stack up. But I do think the Ravens are a pretty clear number one. I do think I've had the Bengals probably in my head number two, but haven't really thought too much about where exactly they are relative to the Steelers. I confess I have not watched I didn't watch a lot of Aaron Rodgers games last year because of just the broadcast schedule and my own job. But like the people that I've listened to, people who have watched film were not all that excited about, what he put on tape for the Jets. And that might have just been a function of where he was and who he was playing for in that offense and that offensive line that he was playing behind. Obviously, there were some moments of hope for him for the Steelers fans based on what he put on tape toward the end of that year. But, you need, I think, in this modern NFL to be that kind of quarterback who can give you that second play opportunity. When the first play breaks down and you need to improvise, make something happen with your legs, do you have the mobility? Do you have the confidence to venture outside the pocket or make that defensive end or defensive tackle miss and find someone outside the structures of the offense? And Aaron Rodgers is an old guy at this point with a lot of wear and tear on his body, and I don't know if he moves as sprightly as he once did with the Packers. So I think I think certainly Pittsburgh's defense can be good enough to get you to be a double digit win team. But I think so much of what Pittsburgh's season could come down to is just, can they be a team that beats you up in the trenches? Like I like a lot of the potential of this Steelers offensive line. And frankly, it was a little bit surprising to, look at some of these rankings for offensive lines in 2025 and see the Steelers as low as they have been, like in the 20s. And I think in one case, even the 30s. I guess a lot of that is just like the weak points of the Steelers offensive line are in fact really, really weak. But, I love Troy Fautanu. Zach Frazier was a revelation as a rookie. McCormick was really, really good as a rookie. Sayumalo is a very nice piece at left guard. So if you have all those guys take a step forward and you have some stability there at left tackle, which I guess is a bit big ass with Broderick Jones, then this could be a plus unit, I think, for the Steelers. And you put that together with, a offense that I imagine will be playing a lot of 12 and 13 personnel. I mean, take it from someone who's covered an offense that over the years has run a lot of 12 and 13 personnel. Teams do not like to play against these big boys. So if this is a Steelers offense that proves it can boss people around and, use the run to set up the play action and give Aaron Rodgers some ample throwing lanes on, passes over the middle or downfield, then there's, I think, hope for this offense to be better than average. But there are just so many conditionals kind of baked into that statement, and it's just going to take a lot of convincing for me to see that this offense has above average units at enough spots on that unit overall for me to be optimistic about what this offense could do in January, perhaps into February, against these bespoke game plans that you come across in the playoffs.
All right, tell people what they're going to find this week over at the Baltimore Banner, and tell them about what you're doing on the podcast and where that's at.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as you guys know, it's kind of a dead. Well, not this week. You guys don't know that we're kind of in the dead zone for NFL coverage. Yeah, I'm sure you have. But we've obviously got some stuff coming out next week with just the top Ravens in 2025. Tomorrow, I believe, on our Band of Ravens podcast, me and my co-host Paul Mancano are going to be doing what's become now an annual tradition of just kind of ranking the individual units across the four AFC North teams and just using that calculation to determine how far apart these teams are and in what pecking order they are. And then obviously, when training camp comes a knocking, we'll be ready to cover that. If you guys have any interest in checking in and seeing how Lamar's doing and how Malachi Stark is doing and all that jazz. But yeah, I mean, it's a nice respite here in the offseason, but obviously before long we'll be back out there in Owens Mills and sweating in the Maryland heat.
All right, great. Jonas, it's so great to catch up with you here as the off season starts to close down and we get closer to training camp. We obviously look forward to having you on a couple of times previewing Ravens Steelers during the season. So we definitely invite you back on for that. Folks can follow Jonas on Twitter at Jonas Shaffer. That's Jonas, Jonas _ Shaffer, Shaffer. Make sure you're reading his work at the Baltimore Banner, which is thebaltimorebanner.com. Jonas, thanks for coming on again with Dave and Alex on the Terrible Podcast on this Wednesday during the offseason.
My pleasure, guys. Always enjoy talking to you.
And welcome back to the Terrible Podcast. Again, our special thanks to Jonas Shaffer, who covers the Ravens for the Baltimore Banner. Be sure to follow him on Twitter at Jonas _ Shaffer. That's Shaffer. Thank you to Jonas for his time, and kudos to the Banner for their investigative journalism that broke that Justin Tucker story.
Yeah, it was great to catch up with Jonas again during the offseason here and the fine work that he does. We spent about 38 minutes with him, got a lot of good information out of him. And please, if you follow him on Twitter, reach out to him and let him know you appreciate him spending time on a Terrible Podcast with us. And we hope to catch up with him a couple times during the season, but it won't be until I don't think later in the season that we talk to him.
Right. What is that? Week 14 will be the first Steelers-Ravens matchup. NFL loves putting those games late in the year when they will have the most weight to them. All right, Dave, let's continue our 90 and 30 series. Didn't do it Monday for obvious reasons, and let's hope all the Steelers we talk about today remain Pittsburgh Steelers. We'll start off with a Steeler who will remain a Steeler this year and hopefully for a long, long time beyond. In first-round pick, Derek Harmon. What are your expectations? What do you want to see most out of Harmon this season?
Look, you got a first-round draft pick here that we're talking about, and we went into this offseason thinking that first-round draft pick might be dedicated to the defensive line, and one specifically that could play more that 3-eye, 4-eye tech, kick out occasionally, maybe the 5, one that can get after the passer, play against the run. The way this depth chart looks right now, and some of the reporting coming out of the off-season programs and all like that, it looks like this guy has a prime opportunity if he stays healthy and on the field and continues to learn the defense to be a week 1 starter. Or at least platoon guy early on. He's going to see snaps right out of the chute. I think how he progresses during the offseason and how he plays during training camp and the preseason and his conditioning will dictate how many snaps that he plays. I think the biggest thing when it comes to Derek Harmon overall is, can he finish the plays? And that was one of the bugaboos coming out of his college career, specifically his last year at Oregon there, left a lot of plays on the field overall. Obviously, the Steelers need him to be stout against the run. I imagine he'll be able to develop more as a pass rusher. I do envision him, though, as being part of a guy that, you got a Quale in there. We'll see how the rest of the depth chart shakes out. You're obviously going to have Keanu Benton get in there in some sub-package situations. I could view Harmon as a guy, 600, 700 snaps or so, maybe a little bit more than that, depending on injuries and all, as a rookie. And obviously, you want to root for this guy to win the team's annual Joe Green Great Performance Award, which is the annual Steelers Rookie of the Year. So we should be expected for him to play a high volume-ish amount of snaps on the defensive side of football. And, we'll measure him on a week-to-week basis as he goes. But I think the big thing with him is getting him to finish plays in the backfield for this team.
Obviously, you want Derek Harmon to be good at everything, to be this well-rounded impact player in the run and pass game. But if I made you choose, what is more important to see out of Harmon this year, to be an impact pass rusher or an impact run defender?
I think he was good overall when you look at pressures and all like that. He just wasn't finishing some of these sacks. I think if I had a wish of which area of his game I'd like to come out of saying that improved greatly. I mean, playmaking is playmaking. Obviously, you want to see those plays made. I would say I just want to see him be a little bit stouter against the run because Lord knows, as we talked about, up the spine is where the Steelers defense has to get better in 2025. So I want to be talking about, boy, what did you think about the way Harmon played against the run in 2025? And oh yeah, he was kind of as expected as a pass rusher, and he was able to finish a couple extra plays.
Right. Obviously, as a pass rusher, that's going to be important. I talked about the need for the defensive line to, carry their own weight, not let Hayward put up 75% of the unit sacks, but run defense is the number one goal of the offseason. It wilted last year. It has to be stronger and stouter. If you do that, the pass rush will naturally come for himself and for others. So I'm with you on run defense, but both obviously very important.
Right. And you obviously want him to stay healthy and take a step forward in becoming that next great defensive lineman on the Steelers defense.
Who has better odds of winning the Joe Green Rookie of the Year award, Derek Harmon or Caleb Johnson?
Yeah, that's a good question. And Caleb was part of the ones that we won't get to him today, but we'll part of the 90 and 30 series that went up, I think, yesterday. I think it's going to be a good battle there. And I think Caleb Johnson has a potential of. Look, we'll see how the how the workload goes, and if any of these guys, if Jalen Warren misses time or whatnot, there's an outside chance I think that Caleb Johnson could rush for 1,000 yards. It's a little bit of a stretch, but he's going to get obviously playing time right out of the chute. If he can, the biggest thing I want to see out of Caleb Johnson, I don't want to spend a lot of time on him, but I want to see that explosive play rate that he had in college. I want to see him become more well-rounded as a pass protector. And even though he wasn't utilized a lot outside of his last season at Iowa in the passing game, he showed that he could catch some balls, and I would expect him to be utilized in that area there. So I do think I think it's even money both sides when it comes to Harmon and Caleb Johnson has potential to be the Rookie of the Year. I can't see where I'm slanted either way, with one being the favorite over the other right now.
I'll give the slight edge to Johnson just because the numbers are a little more in your face. I know the players are going to recognize the talent. They do the voting. It's not a fan vote, but I think Caleb Johnson will give the slight edge. It's just the offensive player who's got the touchdowns and the rushing yards and the big plays just might be a little more gaudy and visible than Derek Harmon. But yeah, we'll talk about Johnson on your law firm edition when you had the Johnson and Johnson,
Right.
Brandon, Caleb, and Quindell. We'll talk about that probably for next show. All right, Dave, let's go to linebacker Devin Harper, who I think is an interesting name, lost in the shuffle of a very deep inside linebacker room of Patrick Queen and Peyton Wilson, Malik Harrison, Cole Holcomb, Carson Bruner, Mark Robinson. So tough odds for Harper, but a good athlete coming out of Oklahoma State. Also, he is reunited with his linebackers coach that drafted him in Dallas. Scott McCurley was in Dallas when Harper was a Cowboy, and now McCurley hired to replace Aaron Curry in Pittsburgh. Don't sleep on Devin Harper.
Yeah, but this inside linebacker room is kind of full. Obviously, at this point, former 2000 and came out with the Cowboys 6th round 2022 NFL draft out of Oklahoma State. He had an Achilles tendonitis, I think, which wiped out his rookie season for the most part. Spent most of that season on injured reserve with the Cowboys. For his NFL career to date, he's appeared in 12 games. Last action coming in 2023. Logged all of 4 defensive snaps in regular season play to date. But he does have 195 more on special teams. So he does have a special teams resume to him. 3 of his 5 total NFL tackles have come on special teams. But look, you look at this inside linebacker room, which is really, really full right now. We're going to talk about one more of those here and the next guy that we talk to here. You got a draft pick in that room, also in Carson Bruner, that's got special teams experience. Realistically, as we go through training camp and the rest of the summer here, we're going to just be watching if Harper can do enough on special teams, how he fits in on a defense. Can he do enough that he lands one of these practice squad spots?
Right. Yeah, definitely a tough path, but somebody I think who could make some plays this summer. All right, let's go to another inside linebacker in Malik Harrison, signed over from the Baltimore Ravens, viewed as a quasi Landon Roberts replacement, but Harrison's defensive role will be partially dictated and impacted by what Peyton Wilson does in year two. If Wilson makes a big jump, Harrison may be just a special teamer, but he has an extensive special teams background and should be at the least a multi-phase guy that can run and hit on the coverage units, Dave.
Look, this team's paying Malik Harrison more in cash this year than they are Cole Holcomb. So and then we talked a lot. They did not re-sign Landon Roberts during the offseason, and Harrison's got more of that Landon Roberts game in him. He can play on special teams, downhill thumper. Could see most of his defensive playing time against the run. And I think on early downs, this team does probably expecting Peyton Wilson to take the next step forward and play in at a minimum in some passing situations when two linebackers are on the field. Obviously need Wilson to become more of that downhill thumper type guy, get off blocks. But this gives you a Landon Roberts type of guy that can do a lot of things, play on special teams, and I think his playing time is going to be dictated more with what this team thinks they have in Peyton Wilson more than anything else. He's going to be on the 53-man roster. I think all told, I put down here, he could log around 300 defensive snaps in 2025 and maybe even more should injuries hit. And he obviously is going to log a lot of special teams tackles or snaps and hopefully tackles as well too, because he could end up being a core special teams player for this team. So interesting to see. I mean, look, we both accept and think he's going to be on a 53-man roster. I think just his early down usage is going to be interesting to track overall as compared to a guy like Peyton Wilson. And, could he indeed make Cole Holcomb expendable by the end of this summer?
A lot of variables in that inside linebacker room. Peyton Wilson's growth and ascension, Cole Holcomb's health and play coming off the injury, Carson Bruner, his rookie performance, Harrison's role himself. Yeah, a lot of questions there, but it's a good inside linebacker room, a lot of options, many different skill sets, guys who can play on special teams. And so it's one of is it the strongest position group Pittsburgh has, soup to nuts, top to bottom?
Oh,
I mean, Queen has his concerns still. I get that, and Wilson has growth as a run defender too. But it's a deep group at the least.
Yeah. I mean, and you got some smart guys in there. Obviously, you're not going to see if Bruner makes his team. Hopefully, not have to see him play any defensive snaps, and we'll see what the future holds for Cole Holcomb if he makes his team or not. If Holcomb makes this team, then you're looking at Queen, Peyton Wilson, Malik Harrison, Holcomb, and maybe one more inside linebacker. And, obviously that one will be asked to play a lot on special teams, much in the way Tyler Matakevich was last year. It's a good, deep group. I think the biggest question when it comes to this room right now is, can they all stay healthy all summer? And if they do, what's going to happen with Cole Holcomb, I think, is the biggest question.
I guess thinking about it for a second, I should look one position over and say edge is probably a better and stronger group overall of Watt, Highsmith, Herbig, and Jack Sawyer. Rank these three rooms, Dave, from strongest to weakest. They're all pretty good, though, I think. Tight end, outside linebacker, and inside linebacker.
I would go outside linebacker for obvious reasons there. I mean, I remember a couple summers right in a row just thinking, who's number 3, let alone number 4. It's hard not to like the outside linebacker room. Second, I would go inside linebacker for the sheer fact that, I wonder about Freiermuth and Jonnu Smith in the blocking aspect of things when they're not when they're used in a running game. I think Darnell's fine. I hope Darnell takes the next step forward. I think he made progress last year. So I would put tight end group last. I would go outside linebacker, inside linebacker, and then tight end group. Now, obviously, you expect your tight ends to play a big role in the passing game, but that's not all that you need out of this tight end room.
Sure. I'll say outside linebacker number 1. I'm with you. I'll go tight end 2 and inside linebacker 3, just because there are some of those questions at the top about Queen's play and Wilson's play. There's upside there, but there's still some things you want to see out of those guys.
Okay.
All right. Speaking of outside linebacker, and speaking of that question, who would be this team's number 3? Not a question the last couple of years, not a question this year. Nick Herbig, who had 5.5 sacks last season. Kind of forget about that, Dave. He got hurt. He missed some time. That slowed him down a little bit. Pittsburgh had some of those outside linebacker injuries to Highsmith and Herbig, but Herbig in his 3rd season could start on a bunch of teams. A great number 3 in Pittsburgh.
Boy, another opportunity for the listeners to hear us talk about us and being off on Herbig, and he really has. People get a kick out of that. Really has come into his own nicely. It's a shame that he did miss those games last year. Was still able to play 415 defensive snaps. He continues to be a guy that when he's on the field, he's on the field. And even in those 415 defensive snaps that he played last season, still had 22 total tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 5.5 sacks, 4 forced fumbles. I mean, you got a ball hunter here, 2 fumble recoveries. Boy, what a key play right out of the shoot against, what was it, the Ravens last year? Wasn't he part of that? Nick Herbig
Against Baltimore?
Yeah, against Henry and getting that ball loose.
Oh, yeah, he had the forced fumble in the first play of the game.
Run defense and tackling, I thought both took a little step backwards in 2024. Needs attention this summer as a pass rusher. However, Herbig continued to show that he can get to opposing quarterbacks quite regularly in meaningful situations. I think he's still growing in some of the speed to power game. As well. I'm not concerned about him. He's going to be a guy, especially in pass rush situations, that you better pay attention to on the field. There's going to be opportunities for this team to put 3 outside linebackers on the field at times. Move these guys around a little bit more. I look forward to that. I think just the biggest question for Herbig is can he get a little bit better against the run? Can he help this team get Highsmith and Watt off the field a couple of plays a game? Not have a downgrade there. He's going to play. Here's the thing about him with the special team snaps. He only logged 174 of those last year. Now, obviously, he did miss those games last year due to injury. Might they take him? Might even in a healthy season for him, might he just have that lesser special teams role than per se he did as a rookie, because you have guys in Sawyer that can help eat up some of those snaps. An inside linebacker in Harris and a couple of these other guys just help alleviate some of his Herbig's special teams role.
You have the inside linebacker room that's deep that can do that. We'll see how Sawyer looks on special teams, but also you do want to get Herbig snaps, and he's not going to get a ton at outside linebacker. He's your top backup, but you want to maximize his playing time, and whether that's on special teams or defense, I think you want to get this guy on the field as much as humanly possible because he's an impact player every single time he's out there.
I guess the biggest thing, over under 200 special team snaps, because that gets you in that kind of close to core area. And once again, he played 174, but he missed 3-4 games last year.
4 games.
4 games.
And maybe he had gotten hurt midway through one of them. I think Dallas
possibly
game, I believe. That sounds right. So, good question.
Especially with all, you got Sawyer going to be in there. You got, we'll see if Bruner makes this team.
I'll take the over. I'm taking the over.
All right. I'll go under. I'll go like 80 special team snaps for Herbig. I think you want to keep him a little fresher. You got other guys that can do the dirty jobs now.
We'll be charting it. All right, let's go to Cam Hayward. He will not play 200 special team snaps this year, but will play plenty on defense. Historically good year last year. Quieted the critics off the contract, off the injury. Had a fantastic season. Maybe one of his best ever, which is insane to say for a 35-year-old defensive lineman. Run defense still elite. The bull rush is still there. What more is there to say about Cam Hayward?
Yeah, we don't need to spend a lot of time on this. I think the biggest thing overall, can he can he put up a season similar to the one that he did last season? I think one of the things that kind of jumped out of me when writing this up is that he only played 778 defensive snaps. And how many years previously are we saying in non-injury seasons for Cameron Hayward that, boy, it'd be nice to get him off the field occasionally. And the fact that he only played 778, still put up the stats that he put up, I think, should kind of be a goal. Can you keep him around the 800 snap mark? And can he continue to make the impact? 12 tackles for loss, 20 quarterback hits, 11 passes defense. Is there anybody better in the NFL when it comes to defensive linemen of getting those hands up and pass defending? I think not.
Mm-hmm.
We saw what he did to Jackson, who's
Lamar Jackson?
No, the Raiders offensive lineman.
Jackson Powers Johnson.
Yeah, Jackson Powers Johnson and schooling those guys. Still has the long arm. Still can move and all. Just don't want to see any significant drop off from what he had last year. That's it. That's the story.
Yeah, just managing his snap count, making sure there's not too much put on his plate. He'll get plenty of his camp rest days and probably will barely practice this year, and that's all well and good because he's good to go on game day. The just question is, I mean, the 36-year-old, how many sacks does he have? I was comparing him to the late Steve McMichael, who had 10.5 sacks as a 35-year-old interior lineman in 92 for the Bears and 93 at age 36. McMichael had 6 sacks. Can Cam Hayward pass 6 sacks in 2025, Dave?
I think so.
I think he's I'm not going to have any limitations on him, but if he can do that, that is historical territory. You think he needs to for the defensive health?
Yeah, I think he needs to. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I hope there is more pass rush support where if he has, let's say, quote unquote, only 6 sacks, which is still a great number for his age and standing, the other defensive linemen, Harmon, Benton, and others are picking up the slack. And this is a defensive line. How many sacks should this D line have? What's a good target for the unit in 2025?
Oh, that's a good question. Let's see. I don't know. I'm kind of expecting at least 15 out of TJ. I want
putting the edge guys, but the pure defensive linemen, Benton, Harmon, Hayward.
Right. I'm trying to backwards the math out overall because look, this team needs to get back over 50 sacks again, right?
Yes, it's been a long time coming. 40 last year is unacceptable.
Okay. Let me just go by defensive lineman here. 6, 5, 11, 15. 15 sounds like a target number for the defensive line.
Last year, I think it was 12.5 because I know Hayward had 8. I believe I said the rest of the D line had 4.5, so 15.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
I'll take a little bit higher. I'll say 16, 17. I know maybe we're splitting hairs, but this defensive line, with all that's invested in it, all that it's capable of doing, Ben, a capable rusher, Harmon too. I want to see a really big jump there.
I mean, to get them to 55, if the defensive line had 15, that leaves 40 out there for the other guys. Is that too rich?
Depends if TJ Watt can have a 20 sack season. If he can solve half that problem, then it's not. If he's going to be the 13, 14 sack guy, then that's probably asking too much from the others.
Then we're probably going to need the 17 or the 18 out of the defensive line then.
Right. But either way, Hayward will do his thing, and there's little doubt about that. Connor Hayward, on the other hand, his brother just trying to make the roster, and his chances just got squeezed a bit more by the addition of Jonnu Smith. Now, Pittsburgh kept 4 tight ends last year, and they probably will do the same this year, or at least 3 tight ends and a fullback. So there's still a path for Hayward, but that path is getting more narrow.
Let's see, 200 offensive snaps for Connor last year during the regular season. That was he probably wouldn't have played that if Michael Pruitt had stayed healthy. He registered just 6 receptions for 40 yards and a touchdown. Nearly half of those 40 receiving yards came on 1 catch, and he only had 2 receptions for 11 yards in the team's final 11 games. How about that for a stat for you for a guy that's got good hands and a team that didn't have Michael Pruitt and a few other guys last season. Was used a bit more, I guess, in a fullback alignment in 2024 and overall logged 82 offensive snaps from the quote unquote backfield. it's not hard to go up in this area. I thought his blocking overall was slightly improved, and that was only because I thought he made contact on some cuts coming across in some of that split zone stuff. But I'm all for not having to look. You got your top three tight ends in Freiermuth, Jonnu Smith, and Darnell Washington. How many snaps, offensive snaps, if those guys stay healthy, are you actually going to be on target for Hayward to play? And within that, I'm not looking forward to him having to run block a lot other than occasional split zone type stuff. His value to this team, and he's going to have to earn it again, is on special teams. Let's see, remained a primary player, logged 303 special teams snaps, and that tied him for the team lead with Miles Killebrew, recorded 8 special teams tackles and 1 fumble recovery. I can't recall when Danny Smith's birthday is, but if it's between now and the start of week 1, he better not forget that day.
It is November 7th.
Oh,
for those
okay.
wondering.
Well, he might want to fire off an early birthday gift here. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out for him because of his size, his blocking ability. Yes, he can catch the football, but ideally you're not going to use him in the passing game. It feels like special teams or bust for Connor Hayward, and if he does not make the 53-man roster, you have to wonder how how serious other teams around the league will look at him as well too. I guess what I'm getting at is, could we get to week 1, Alex, and Connor Hayward be a member of the Steelers practice squad?
It is possible. You said it well. The phrase is special teams or bust. There is value there. What you laid out is good information. I don't see the offensive value. I think Arthur Smith struggled to find a way to use him last year. It was mostly that Y-off, split flow type stuff. The passing game numbers cratered. Now, granted, Freiermuth and Washington were healthy all year, and so that's one reason why the production dipped from 23 to 24, but there just really wasn't a good theory of how to use this guy, despite being pretty athletic and I think a capable receiver. You go back to his Michigan State tape, he made some plays there. So you had Jonnu Smith, then you're competing with DJ Thomas Jones. How much is it 2 dogs, 1 bone for those guys? Thomas Jones could be that pure lead blocking fullback, but can he play on special teams? If he can show that, then maybe that really truly pushes Hayward off the roster. If not, maybe Hayward sticks around and Thomas Jones is an elevation or something like that. So we shall see.
He is in the crosshairs to be a 51, 52, or 53rd member of the roster this year at best, right?
Right. I'll ask this question even with that in mind, him being a bubble guy, but who has more in 2025? Cam Hayward sacks or Connor Hayward receptions? I'm giving you the tough question.
Sacks.
You think he'll have more than Connor Hayward receptions?
Yeah, I mean, Connor Hayward only had 6 receptions last year, and that was even with and you're hoping not to have to use him in the passing game. If he makes the roster, he's still going to get, and look, as I stated, he only had 2 receptions for 11 yards in the team's final 11 games last year. So if your game plan centers around getting the ball to Connor Hayward, something's gone wrong.
Well, Arthur Smith likes his Rolodex at tight ends, and
sure,
these guys rotate.
I have no problem with one catch every 5 weeks.
Let me ask it this way: who has more, Cam Hayward sacks or Connor Hayward special teams tackles? He had 8 last year combined.
Well, that all depends if he makes the team or not, right?
That is part of the question. So was the receptions one? Yeah, it's all part and parcel.
Oh, you make it tough. I'm gonna go. Cam Hayward has more sacks than Connor Hayward has total special teams tackles.
All right, fair enough. Because there's a good chance Hayward may not be on this roster. I will say I'll go Cam Hayward for both, because I am certainly far from convinced that Connor Hayward makes his team. He could. I don't want to sit there and say, oh, he's not because Jonnu Smith is here, but he's feeling the squeeze.
Absolutely.
All right, that wraps up our 90 and 30. We'll get to the next group of players for the next show. Anything else here, Dave? Any other late breaking news? It has been a whirlwind week of the trades of Rodgers out there in Malibu. A college basketball video game is coming out in 2028, which is super exciting for me. I know you're probably super excited as well, Dave. So anything else to discuss?
Pirates, 5 straight. How about that?
Yeah, and in convincing fashion, narrow victory yesterday, but deep pitching's been amazing. The offense is perked up. Did I open a wormhole, though? Is it because I went and watched a Pirates win that Minkah got traded? Did I somehow screw up the universe's balance or something, Dave? Is this my fault?
I don't know, but I was glad to see you get that proverbial monkey off your back there. And because if they would have ended up, who were they playing? Was it Milwaukee?
The Mets.
The Mets. The Mets would have came back and won that game after the big lead that the Pirates had. I was going to request that they post a sign outside to never let you in a Pirates game ever again.
Listen, I wouldn't have gone back if that had happened. I would have tapped out. All right, Dave, let's get to some read emails and close out today's show.
We've gone a little long, haven't we? You want to hold off maybe until Friday, or you want to take a few?
Yeah, we have been going pretty long. I know people are probably asking some questions about the Minkah stuff, but let's probably save that for Friday. We'll do a pretty big email show for Friday.
All right, and we have Scott Petrak, who covers the Browns, scheduled for the Friday show to talk about the Browns. Maybe we'll only do 3 of the 90 and 30 so we can save some room for some questions. So if you have questions and we haven't got to them, I apologize. I know we got quite a few of them in here, but it's been kind of a crazy week, and we had a lot of requests to get these beat writers on to preview the AFC North, and we're doing that for you. We just don't want these things to turn into 4-hour shows, which I know wouldn't upset some of you, but we just ran out of time today. So in the meantime, you can follow me on Twitter /X at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate to the cause, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the donate button. Also, if you like an ad-free version, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the ad-free button, follow the directions that way. Once again, shout out to Jonas Schaefer for coming on the show today. Shout him out on Twitter, if you will. And until Friday, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.